Hello and welcome to Democracies of the World, our show on Sansad TV, where we take you through the latest happenings from parliaments across the globe. In today's episode, we will talk about election in major democracies of the world. In the next half an hour, we will also take a look at what is happening in Nepal and what it can mean for its neighboring countries. I'm your host, Bhwana Nayar. Let's begin our show with the news coming in from United States. The U.S. House of Representatives was adjourned for a second day on Wednesday without electing a new speaker after Republican leader Kevin McCarthy failed in 6 consecutive votes to secure enough support to be elected speaker. It was the first time in 100 years that a speaker was not elected on the first vote. The lack of a speaker left the House in disarray, largely due to the fact that rank-and-file members cannot be sworn into office until a speaker is elected. McCarthy from California has served as the top House Republican since 2019 and led his party's successful effort to win control of the chamber in the 2022 midterm elections. But he has now fallen short in 6 straight votes over 2 days as a group of 20 hardline conservatives have refused to back him, leaving him short of the 218 votes needed to win the job. House of Representatives will keep voting until someone wins a majority. Moving on, Brazil's Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who sworn in as the 39th president on January 1, has committed to address the nation's inequalities. The 77-year-old Lula secured a 3rd term after defeating far-right incumbent Jair Bolsonaro in October during the tightest presidential race in decades. His return to power marks the culmination of a political comeback that is thrilling supporters and enraging opponents in a fiercely polarized nation. Here's a report.
Leftist leader Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has pledged to rebuild Brazil with the people as he was sworn in as the new president of Brazil for a historic 3rd term on January 1st. The inauguration ceremony was held at the capital city of Brasilia amid heightened security. The veteran left-wing politician, known widely as Lula, also led the country between 2003 and 2010 and defeated Jair Bolsonaro in October's poll. In his first speech, 77-year-old Lula vowed to rebuild the country in terrible ruins. He described Bolsonaro's government as one of the worst periods in Brazilian history and called the last few years an era of shadows, doubts and a lot of suffering. The veteran leader also promised to fight to improve life for poor Brazilians, work towards racial and gender equality and achieve zero deforestation in the Amazon rainforest. Delegations from 50 countries were present in Congress for the swearing-in ceremony. After the ceremony, Lula rode by open-top Rolls-Royce to the Planalto Palace to don the presidential sash before a crowd of 30,000 supporters from his Workers' Party. Bolsonaro had repeatedly refused to hand over the sash to his successor as per tradition. So black garbage collector Eileen Souza made the presentation. Tens of thousands more people gathered on Brasilia's Esplanade to celebrate his new term. Lula's return to power comes after he spent more than a year in prison between 2018 and 2019 due to a controversial sentence that was later annulled by the Supreme Court. In October, Lula da Silva was elected president with 60.3 million votes, while then-President Jair Bolsonaro obtained 58.2 million votes. Lula beat Bolsonaro by less than 2% of the vote. The far-right leader Jair Bolsonaro refused to admit defeat and cast doubts on the country's electronic voting system. Born in October 1945, Lula served 2 consecutive terms as president of Brazil from 2003 to 2010, and he was the first working-class president in the country's history. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
In a hope to end a prolonged political impasse in European Union's poorest member country, Bulgarian President Rumen Radev has formally asked, "We continue the change." the country's second-largest party to form a government. The Prime Minister-designate Nikolai Denkov has 7 days to propose a government which will then need the backing of the parliament in a simple majority vote. The centre-right GERB party, which won on October 2nd snap election, failed to win support for a technocrat cabinet last month. More details in the next report.
Bulgarian President Rumen Radev on Tuesday handed a mandate to the second largest political party in parliament to form a government to prevent the country from sliding to the fifth general elections in 2 years. Although the chances of the reformist We Continue the Change party's success are dim. Its Prime Minister-designate Nikolai Denkov said that a lot of problems have built up, reforms have been delayed, and we need a government to unite people and address their problems. Denkov, a 60-year-old chemistry professor and former education minister, will have a week to propose a cabinet, which should then be approved in parliament. The cabinet will need the backing of 121 MPs in the 240-seat National Assembly to take office. WCC, which led the ruling four-party coalition that collapsed in June, has 53 MPs. The move comes after the main group in parliament, the centre-right GERB party, failed to end the European Union and NATO members' latest political crisis amid growing economic woes and soaring tensions with Russia. If Denkov fails to muster a majority, which analysts say is more than likely, the president must pick a third party of his choice to try to form a ruling coalition. And if that fails, he will dissolve parliament and schedule a snap election for the spring. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
And now let's turn our attention to Israel, where Benjamin Netanyahu was sworn in as Israel's Prime Minister for a sixth time last week, leading the Jewish state's most right-wing government to date. Here's a report.
Benjamin Netanyahu was sworn into office on December 29th, taking the helm of the most right-wing and religiously conservative government in Israel's history.
אני, בנימין נתניהו, בן צילה ובן ציון, זיכרונם לברכה, מתחייב כראש הממשלה לשמור אמונים למדינת ישראל ולחוקיה.
Netanyahu took the oath of office moments after Parliament passed a vote of confidence in his new government. Of the Parliament's 120 members, 63 voted in favor of the new government, with 54 votes against. Benjamin Netanyahu also held his first cabinet meeting after being sworn into office and said he will work for all the citizens of Israel. His return marks his sixth term in office, continuing his more than a decade-long dominance over Israeli politics. His swearing-in marks a personal return to power and the arrival of a government that has sparked fears among Palestinians as well as left-wing Israelis. Speaking at the parliament ahead of the swearing-in of the new government, Netanyahu said that the three national goals of his government would be to prevent Iran from going nuclear, launch a bullet train that runs across the length of the country, and bring more Arab countries into the Abraham Accords fold. Netanyahu is the country's longest-serving prime minister, having held office from 2009 until 2021 and a stint in the 1990s. He was ousted from office last year after 4 deadlock elections by a coalition of 8 parties solely united in their opposition to his rule. Despite his political comeback, he remains on trial for charges of fraud, breach of trust, and accepting bribes in 3 corruption cases. He, however, denies all charges against him. Netanyahu's win in the November 1st parliamentary elections was expected to end years of political unrest in Israel, with governments repeatedly falling and the elections held 5 times in less than 4 years. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
Moving on to our next story, environmental activists sprayed orange paint on the facade of the Italian Senate on January 2 to protest against the government's climate change inaction. The activists from the group Last Generation used fire extinguishers to spray the windows and main doors of Palazzo Madama, seat of one of the 2 branches of the Italian parliament. The environmental group cited a report released on 29th December by Italian environmental group Ligambiante, according to which meteorhydrogeological events were up 55% in 2022 compared to a year earlier, with events linked to bad weather resulting in 29 deaths. Floods, waves of abnormal heat and intense frost, landslides, droughts and hailstorms affected the whole country in 2022, which marked more heat and drought than previous ones. And news now from Myanmar, where the country's junta chief has said that it will hold free and fair multi-party elections as it marked Independence Day on Wednesday. Meanwhile, to commemorate the 75th anniversary of its independence from Britain, the country also began a mass release of prisoners, including some political detainees, on Wednesday. The military government said it was pardoning around 7,012 prisoners, along with the partial commutation of the sentences of other inmates not convicted of serious crimes. At Myanmar's most notorious jail, relatives thronged the gates and celebrated as loved ones were driven out of the compound on buses. Meanwhile, a military court has convicted the Myanmar's former leader Aung San Suu Kyi of corruption, sentencing her to 7 years in prison in the last of a string of criminal cases against her. The court's action leaves her with a total of 33 years to serve in prison, following a series of politically tinged prosecutions since the army toppled her elected government in February 2021. The Nobel Peace Prize winner has also previously been ordered to serve a total of 26 years in prison after being found guilty of a wide range of offences. What would it mean in the politics of Myanmar? Let's see in this report.
A Myanmar military court on December 30th sentenced country's ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi to a further 7 years in prison, taking her overall jail time to 33 years. The country's former democratically elected leader has been under house arrest since the military ousted her government in a coup in February 2021. Since then, she's faced 18 months of trials on 19 charges. On December 30th, she was sentenced on the final 5 charges she faced. A court found her guilty of corruption because she had not followed regulations in renting a helicopter for a government minister. She had already been convicted of 14 different crimes, including breaching COVID public safety rules, importing walkie-talkies, and violating the Official Secrets Act, although she has denied all the charges against her.
Regrettably, the Gambia has placed before the court an incomplete and misleading factual picture of the situation in Rakhine State in Myanmar. Yet, it is of the utmost importance that the court assess the situation obtaining on the ground in Rakhine dispassionately and accurately.
The 77-year-old Nobel Peace Prize winner has spent most of her time in detention under house arrest in the capital, Naypyidaw. Last week, the UN Security Council called for an end to violence in Myanmar and the release of all political prisoners.
Today, we've sent a firm message to the military that they should be in no doubt. We expect this resolution to be implemented in full. We've also sent a clear message to the people of Myanmar that we seek progress in line with their rights, their wishes, and their interests.
The military's violent seizure of power last February triggered widespread demonstrations, prompting Myanmar's military to crack down on pro-democracy protesters and activists. It also triggered renewed internal fighting between separate ethnic rebel groups, a civilian force resisting the military, and the junta rulers. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
Going in for a very short break here, we'll be back with more news on democracies of the world. You stay tuned to Sansad TV. Welcome back after the break. You're watching our special program, Democracies of the World. Moving on, news now coming in from neighbouring Nepal, where former Maoist guerrilla Pushpakamal Dahal, who led a decade-long insurgency against Nepal's Hindu monarchy, was sworn in on December 26th as Prime Minister for a third time. Let's take a look at how Pushpakamal Dahal returned as Nepal's Prime Minister.
Pushp Kamal Dahal, popularly known as Prachanda, returned as Nepal's Prime Minister on December 26th after joining hands with former Premier KP Sharma Oli. Prachanda and Oli lead the Communist Party of Nepal, Maoist Centre, and the Communist Party of Nepal, Unified Marxist-Leninist, respectively. Pushp Kamal Dahal will reportedly head the new government for the first half of the 5-year term, with the support of the opposition Communist UML party and some other smaller groups. Last month's election had returned a hung parliament. According to the local media, Prachanda, who replaced Sher Bahadur Deuba of the Nepali Congress Party, will step down in 2025, making way for the UML to take over the office. The new coalition came to power after Prachanda, 68, surprisingly walked out of the ruling alliance, led by Deuba of the Nepali Congress Party. Deuba refused to back Prachanda for the Prime Minister's job. Deuba and Prachanda had both campaigned in the November election, pledging to keep the old alliance intact for several years. Prachanda's Maoist Centre Party won 32 seats in the 275-member House of Representatives. The UML has 78 seats, and the rest, required for the 138 majority, will be controlled by smaller groups. The Nepali Congress Party will be the main opposition, controlling 89 seats. Analysts said Prachanda was unlikely to provide the country with stability due to many coalition partners. He also faces serious economic challenges. Inflation is more than 8%, the highest in 6 years. Nepal, tucked between China and India, also faces dwindling foreign exchange reserves with an increasing dependence on imports of basic goods. Nepal has seen 10 government changes since 2008, when the 239-year-old monarchy was abolished. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
And news now from Peru. Anti-government protests resumed on Wednesday across Peru after a brief pause during the past weeks. The Ombudsman Office reported blockades of roads in 36 provinces, some of which ended in confrontations between police and demonstrators. Police dispersed one of these demonstrations in Arequipa after protesters blocked the street with fences removed by them from the local airport. In Lima, demonstrators tried to reach the Congress to demand representatives step down. Meanwhile, President said her transition government has already started a dialogue with all sectors involved. President Dina Boluarte took over for former President Pedro Castillo after he sought to dissolve Congress ahead of lawmakers' third attempt to impeach him. Peru is set to hold early elections in an attempt to defuse a national political crisis marked by deadly unrest after lawmakers ousted Castillo. And an arrest warrant has been issued in Botswana for former President Ian Khama on a charge of illegal possession of firearms. Khama, currently residing in neighboring South Africa, denies the charge. The former president was formally charged in April last year but has not been appeared in court. A Botswana court issued the warrant for Khama's arrest last week. Khama has been in South Africa for about a year after falling out with his hand-picked successor, President Mokgweetsi Masisi. Khama, who is 69 years old, president of Botswana between 2008 and 2018, said he is being hounded for his opposition to Masisi. For physically assaulting a female parliamentary colleague, 2 opposition Senegalese lawmakers were sentenced to 6 months in prison on January 2. A pro-government legislator in Senegal was slapped and then kicked in the stomach during a chaotic session of the National Assembly, sparking anguished debate about democracy in the country. After a trial that began on December 19, MPs Mamadou Niang and Massata Sam were both sentenced to 6 months in prison. They were also fined $150 each and ordered to pay damages to 5 million francs. Prosecutors had requested 2-year sentences. The brawl occurred on December 1 during a routine vote on the budget of the Justice Ministry. And with that, it's a wrap of today's edition of our program on Democracies of the World. Connect with us on various social media platforms for all the latest from around the world. Thank you for staying in. Stay tuned for more informative program on Sansad TV. Till then, goodbye. Namaskar.